animated. They like dog park before it sat down for heaven to travel before now later. That was the...
Do you belong to the jet set now? Do you travel? Do you belong to the jet set? That means... Okay.
This is the thing about
All right, now direct your questions to both. If you had some more questions you wanted to ask Colleen, that's fine, but kind of mix it up a little bit, and then if someone else comes walking in, we'll interrupt and bring them into the scene, okay?
Debbie, my name is Gloria Baker, and it's nice to meet you. I'd like to ask you, you said that you graduated from, after high school, you went to University of Utah, and then where did you go?
I went to Long Beach, California.
Long Beach, California. And you went to school?
For 2 years. And I graduated and back to the dining place.
So, and what is your job now?
I'm proud before I got laid off, I put a lot of doctors in the paper before the test started over.
Well, thank you.
Goodbye.
All right. Debbie and Colleen have given a little background. You know the usual background that groups. We've been on the same scenario we've used before.
Okay.
Now you notice what I'm doing? I'm talking about scenario and changing the vocabulary and so on, and we're just having a write. Okay? Not a rot, but a write.
Okay.
And so Diane, would you give a little background of the usual nature of things and conditions so they can get an idea of your background?
I'm Diane Kellermeyer. I'm originally from the LA area. I lost my hearing when I was 2 years old through the mumps, and immediately my parents put me on hearing aids and enrolled me in preschool programs, beginning with USC, where they had a program for teachers and they needed children to work on, so that's where I went. And then later, when I was very involved in the preschool program on a hearing campus for hearing impaired children. But from the first grade on, I was always integrated with elementary school classes, regular school classes. I forgot to mention to you what my hearing loss is. I'm totally deaf in my left ear, and in my right ear I have about a 65 decibel loss, and I wear a hearing aid in that ear. When I was in the 7th grade, my parents took me out of the special program, and I began to go to the regular elementary school near my home. And from then on, I went to high school and junior college. When I was put into the regular program, I only had speech lessons twice a week for about an hour. And that quit. That ended when I was about 15. I went on to BYU. I majored in English. I've always been involved, well, I used to be involved in dancing, and I was on the ballroom dance team at BYU for 2 years on the performing team. And I'm married, and I'm currently an executive secretary.
All right. Now, we'll expand it. If any more come, we'll do some more expanding. So go ahead with your questions and then involve them as you've been doing, all right? If they don't ask you questions, you ask them questions.
Diane, my name is Tiffany Whitehead, and I was just curious, when you use an oral interpreter, do you use one very often?
I've never used one.
You've never used one? There goes my question. No. How do you find it in a situation of a big group of people?
I always get there early and sit
Sit in the front?
in the front, or at least the second row. So I lip read. I'm a good lip reader, and I don't want to lose my skill, so I always put myself in challenging positions. I suppose I just don't need an oral interpreter. My training was excellent when I was very young.
My wife works in a hospital. She works in an emergency room. And my question is, if you were involved in an emergency, a car accident, for example, what would you like the nurses to do? What would you like the nurses to do to help you with your situation and perhaps not being able to hear or see their lips move or whatever? Could you have some comments about that?
You mean if we were unconscious?
Well,
or
let's take I guess if you're unconscious, it wouldn't matter, because they treat everybody that's unconscious the same. But as you begin to become conscious and awake, then what would you like a nurse to know and understand as you became awake?
I don't know about them, but I don't have any identification. Mm-hmm. I figure if I'm in an accident and if I'm unconscious or something, I'm sure they'll look at my ears and they'll see that I have a hearing aid. Mm-hmm. So they'll know that I have a severe hearing loss. I've been in stressful situations like that, and I've never really had a problem.
First of all, I do belong to from another country. Only things that belong to law and God. So I'm surprised if I tell them I'm very bad. So bad. They say that I'm a vaccine. They thought, I'm a bad. Okay, you keep on. But I'm surprised I'm a bad. So.
I'm a little hard of hearing myself, and I'm not quite following the concept. Maybe I'll pick it up later.
Well, many people, doctors, nurses, firemen, fishermen, robbers, thieves, when they come across a hearing impaired individual, they would see the hearing aid perhaps, or they would, the individual would say, I'm hearing impaired. Mm-hmm. They're shocked. That's worse than the emergency. And they back way off and, would you write it for me? Well, So what will you say? So what are we going to work at? Should I sign to you?
No, talk normally.
Oh, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Talk normally. What else?
Well, this morning I was at 7-Eleven, and the clerk said something to me, and I was, in the middle of getting my money out, so I didn't really, I sort of heard him, but I didn't know what he said, so I said, excuse me. I said, I have a hearing loss. And he said, oh, well, I just wanted to know if there was anything else, I can get you. And I just thought, oh, this has been years since I've encountered this. I was embarrassed for him. Sure. And I said, oh, you don't need to do that. I said, I can understand you just fine. I just need to look at you. So from now on, when I go in that store, he'll remember that.
I was out the field to walk with the field, and I went to get over an access for the 40. Several eyes that were inexperienced. That's a dark fine line, and everybody that's a 40 line.
Yes, don't you like to have people talking loud? Can you hear me all right if I talk loud?
No.
Okay, some more ideas for them.
Debbie, I'm Nadine Allen, and when you went to college, did you use note takers or interpreters in class?
For the university these days, I had an oral interpreter. It's a glass is so large. I still the front. But I got a lot of these scholars. I said I was interpreters, but the guys are really fun. And I have some brothers that love from it. So I can practice the perspective. But it's easier without it. If you have an interpreter, you have to practice the perspective, the reaction. You know what they're saying. Instead of having an interpreter, so they'll be fine for you. So, that's what
I used a note taker for some of my classes, the ones that I knew I was going to hate, or the ones that I knew were going to be hard for me. But I didn't really use them until towards the last couple of years of school because I didn't really understand that that was available.
Colleen, I know you and I know each other, but your dad said something interesting to me the other day that I didn't know about, and that's on your TTY, or your TDD. He said that you had a memory bank, that if someone called you and you were not home, that it would be on the memory. I was fascinated. Tell me, I didn't realize that.
I don't know how to say it. But this is a fear eating game. And that's a lot of it got like this. And I how to feel honestly service. And I do a lot of the things. And that's a hard job trying to do. But my dad. I've been, I think.
It just prints it out?
Yes. What's the paper? And I just tell trying to. Yes, it'll print everything. And everything. That person is about my about that about. You get a bit different. Piece of captioning. Never said but I piece of captioning has a lot. Girl, didn't get a friend with mine. I was so proud to try that. But I really have to try that. There's a friend. But it's fun. What the hell thing? Think me how to sing. Thank you.
This is not a Quaker meeting. I said this is not a Quaker meeting. Everyone remains quiet until inspired. You better get inspired fast because I'm counting. Family, friends, philosophy, points of view, what do they think about sign language? Why don't they use it? Isn't that a better mode? Whatever, ask them, they'll tell you.
Any one of you or all of you, I'd like to know what part of your high school education you thought could be better. What could they have given you in high school to make it easier for you to go to college or to get work? And go ahead.
I have strong feelings about that. I was never really encouraged to go to college. And in fact, when I was 12, 13, 14, I didn't really want to. It wasn't until I was 16 that I began to get a desire to go. But my parents sort of accepted that. All my teachers accepted that. And I think that was wrong. I think I should have been pushed a lot more. I wish now that I had taken college preparatory classes. I wish somebody made me take math, more math. Things like that. I wish that people just didn't accept it. Okay, this is what she wants. She has a hearing loss, so we don't expect that much out of her. My parents expected me to have perfect speech, but they didn't really expect me to go on and have a career or anything. And I was not. That's why I'm just an executive secretary now.
Just.
Because I have just.
Instead of the lawyer.
Yeah, I would have liked to do something like that. Maybe I will. Later.
I was 3 in the future. but I wanted to be, but I wanted to be at the pizza. And I told my parents I was going to school, go to college, through all the education. I'm pretty fucked away. I'm pretty fucked really. So I'm pretty bright. These are, I'm an artist. I can draw these but I can draw, I can make handles for art and everything, but my parents personally, these is so important. I want to know everything, but I'm not be perfect to know everything, but it's about us. So if I can't get my parents to follow the process, that's what I was. My parents were perfectly all about us.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But I was in the everything came. I had set myself, I left our power on. I had never feel peace for the things that they do, but they got back after I got training. Not my back after I got training, so I didn't feel think about college. But of course we talk about going to college and everything. But I'd rather feel but what not officer because I would love to pick up at least sometimes I've thought about pick up a higher. But not that, but there's some things I'm thinking about. But I think feel again if pain includes them like what they've talked about. It could be.
Why don't you, I think in terms of the career development, Colleen, tell them what happened at Utah Power and Light. What did you do? You lost seniority. Tell them about a little about that background, will you? That will give them an idea of what happened to you in terms of, I guess, personal sacrifice. Go ahead and tell them what happened. What did you, finally, where did you go in Utah Power and Light? One of the finest jobs at Utah Power and Light that there is, but tell them a little bit about it.
Okay. I had that job before I left the company I was in case it got quick.
The customer accountant office downtown.
I was in having a then one day and for about decision that I've decided to go on missing for the airplanes suit. So after nearly 7 years at the company I left, the company to see I'm missing. So that means I my city, you know that without a big sacrifice for me because I feel pain, I feel job, I feel supervising. I felt my back, I had to do all of it again. I'm fine. I had to feel happy. I believe it. So,
Tell me, the three of you, I'm really interested. What are your, I know, Colleen, you're really persistent. I know you don't quit. As you keep going and you don't give up on anything. Tell me a little bit about your feelings when people decide, I'm hearing impaired, or I have some other kind of impairment, whether it's physical or mental. Give us an idea of how you view those people who quit.
yeah. I think I thought to do it because I saw I self-esteem. I have a papa, I quite hard. I never want to give up. But I was there, but never give up. Keep going. Fix up. If I feel stupid, or that like that, like my dear baby, brother, that's it. I feel stupid sometimes, but this I feel, then it's not alone. then you keep trying. You got to for the best. And it's not easy, but we have to keep staying about to be positive. With no that. Yeah.
First, I said I never had a problem with my car. But now, I got laid off. And I feel like I can't sell a car. I've been every job for about 4 months. But I finished. But I want to see the job about the car. And I interviewed with the government for the job. But I decided that I did well. So I decided normally, but then after the interview, the time of the bed, and I decided before I leave, I'm going to know that I did it right. And then I don't know that. But now I mean, he's a bad guy. That's what I did, is he did traveling. These are tools that I told how the interview and stuff. And I got 12 years of experience as a guy to read. I got all this bad about 3. I know I'm capable of doing this. I'm better than a person. And they're just putting all of us and the thing about it. This time that I have a bathroom car and kind of, I'm on Cuba. I'm on that. I'm in the middle of a person.
You've done a lot more than a lot of other people would.
I know, that's true.
You all
But the thing of a person that you can, they are not practicing things they never prepared before. So that's why you have to try this. You have to start yourself. Like, hey, I can do it.
Yeah.
So you have to prove yourself. That's good.
Yeah.
Debbie, do you feel that you're being discriminated against because of your hearing loss? We need to, I was just talking to Nadine. Nadine is a member of our A.G. Bell board, and we have a prominent legislator who is also a lawyer, and he's working with us on discrimination cases. We have solved one because we worked on it. Elaine Weinecker was being discriminated against. We solved that one. I think that Nadine and I need to visit with you in terms of some problem areas here. Okay. We'll talk more about that later.
Okay.
In terms of jobs, I got smart real young because I speak well. There were a lot of people out there that didn't really know there was anything wrong. And so I quit telling people that I had a hearing loss, and they didn't find out till after they hired me, and which was fine because we all got along and there was very rarely any problems. People would express surprise and they would say, well, why didn't you say something in the interview? And I would say, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because we never encountered a problem. So I think I probably would have encountered more discrimination in a job, but one of my very first jobs was working in the lingerie department at the May Company in California. And I had my back turned to a customer who was one of those professional shoppers. And I did not know there was a customer there. I was hanging up merchandise, and she said, Miss, and I didn't hear her. And so she turned in this terrible report of how I ignored her. And although she did say that once I turned around, I was very courteous and helpful and so forth. And I was on a temporary job, and I wanted to go back because I was going to school at that time, and I wanted to be able to go back during breaks or whatever. And they wouldn't hire me back because of that one shocking report. So that's when I learned I learned not to tell right off, and I learned not to turn my back whenever possible.
What do you do when you go into a meeting and let's say you're sitting around a table and there are 10 people and you're trying to keep track of the conversation? Have you found some things that help you in that situation?
I've done that as a secretary.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Okay. Fortunately, the groups were very small, 5 or 6 people in somebody's office. I just sat where I could see everyone. And fortunately, I knew the issues. So when the arguments were going, I knew what they were talking about. And my boss always edited the minutes. He would include things that I had left out or even take out things that I had put in. And so that worked out. And then later, I work at the church office building, and I had to take minutes for our department where we have 4 or 5 general authorities sitting there at a time. And I've also taken minutes with all of the presidencies of all the auxiliaries, primary, Relief Society, and Sunday school, and so forth, and a half a dozen other general authorities. And the way I did that was, and other high-level meetings like that, they had me take minutes on the computer, on the word processor, and we just moved the word processor right up to the table so that I'm right there at the left of the chairman of that meeting. And because he's the one that is going to decide pretty much what the decisions are, and that's where everybody's comments are directed. They are looking at him. So I was right there on the left of him, and the computer was quiet, and I could type without having to look at what I was doing, and I could just look at the people and read their lips. And so it was a real challenge, because until I've been with the church for 5 years, and until that time, I really had not been tested in the way of taking minutes. In fact, I don't even know shorthand. But it really made me pleased that I could do that. I felt really good about that.
Well, what do you do when they start discussing things perhaps of a technical nature, using words that you're not familiar with? How do you fill in a word that you don't really understand?
I have in the past, I keep my mouth shut generally during the meeting, but if someone in the meeting has brought up something I didn't really understand, I would go straight to that person after the meeting and say, would you explain this to me? And everybody's very happy, and they want to make sure that it's down right, and so they'll tell you.
The reason I'm asking is I'm having that problem now. I've got a mild hearing loss, but I go into these meetings, and sometimes with the fans running, I don't know what they're saying, you know, and so maybe as I learn to read speech as well as you three have.
Well, another thing I did too, if there were handouts in the meeting, I would read all the handouts before the meeting, so I would understand what the background was.
Let's get on that. Let's have an appointment and go over some of the strategies that we might be able to use. We haven't attended that, but the strategies that Diane is talking about, and Debbie referred to, and Colleen, let's kind of follow up with that, because again it can be discrimination. May I just indicate that in Diane's case, this was with the State Department and employment above all departments, the Department of Employment and personnel, and they were going to dismiss Elaine because she couldn't keep up. And so in the process of analyzing this, our lawyer sent a letter to the head. But Elaine's manager didn't even take time to learn to speech read. And furthermore, when she talked to Elaine, her head was like this. So Elaine never got the messages. And so I invited myself, with the assistance of the lawyer, to hold a conference